When my ex-wife Brooke told the judge that daddies with no money don't deserve kids, she was laughing. Actually laughing, right there in the courtroom, like my heart breaking was the punchline to some cruel joke. 2 years later, I was mopping floors at 3 a.m. in the cardiac wing of Mercy General Hospital when an elderly woman grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Her fingers were cold, trembling, and her eyes were red from crying. "Excuse me, are you James Carter?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. When I nodded, she burst into tears and said something that made my blood run cold. "I've been searching for you for 40 years. Your mother was my daughter. My name is James Carter. I'm 38 years old, and until that moment I thought I knew who I was. A failed husband whose wife left him for my own cousin. A part-time father who could only afford to see his daughter once a month. A night janitor making $14 an hour, cleaning up other people's messes while my own life fell apart. But that night, in that empty hospital corridor, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and the hum of fluorescent lights, I discovered that everything I believed about my past was a lie, and the truth this stranger carried in her manila envelope would change not just my future, but my daughter Ruby's entire life. The woman standing before me was Eleanor Whitman. If you've ever been in a hospital, you've seen her name on half the medical equipment. What she told me next shattered everything I thought I knew about why I grew up without a mother, why my father raised me alone, and why some family wounds take decades to heal. She handed me that envelope with shaking hands, and what was inside changed everything. The truth she'd hidden for 40 years didn't just break me. It rebuilt me into someone who could finally fight for his daughter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that moment mattered, you need to know how far I'd fallen, and how a man who'd lost everything found out he was heir to an empire built on regret. My life before the divorce was nothing special, but it was mine. I worked as a warehouse supervisor at Brennan Logistics in Columbus, Ohio, making $48,000 a year. Not rich, but enough for the 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. Enough for Ruby's dance classes. Enough for Saturday pizza nights and Sunday trips to the zoo. I thought that was what happiness looked like. Predictable, stable, and real. Brooke and I met in college. She was studying marketing while I was getting my degree in business management. Back then, she said she loved how grounded I was, how I didn't need fancy things to be happy. "You're real, James," she used to say, tracing circles on my chest as we lay in our tiny apartment. "You don't pretend to be something you're not." We got married right after graduation. Ruby came along 5 years later, and I swear the moment I held her, everything else in the world made sense. She had Brooke's button nose and my stubborn chin. When she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, I promised her I'd always be there. For 8 years, I kept that promise. Every night after work, I'd help Ruby with her homework at the kitchen table while Brooke made dinner. We'd eat together, talking about our days. Ruby would tell us about her friend Madison who could do a cartwheel, or how Mrs. Peterson let them have extra recess. Simple moments that I didn't know I should have been memorizing. The shift started when Trevor visited for Thanksgiving 3 years ago. My cousin had always been competitive, even as kids. But while I was working steady jobs and raising a family, Trevor was wheeling and dealing in commercial real estate. He showed up in a black Tesla, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. "Jimmy," he called out, using the nickname I'd always hated. "Look at you, still in Columbus, still playing it safe." Brooke's entire demeanor changed that day. She laughed louder at Trevor's jokes, leaned in when he talked about his properties in California, his vacation home in Aspen, his investment portfolio. That night, after Trevor left, she stood at our kitchen sink, staring out at our modest backyard. "Your cousin really made something of himself," she said quietly. "We've made something too," I replied, gesturing at Ruby's artwork on the refrigerator, the family photos on the wall. Brooke turned to face me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: disappointment. Don't you ever want more, James? Don't you think Ruby deserves more? Ruby deserves love and stability. She has that. Love doesn't pay for college. Stability doesn't buy opportunities. The arguments started small. Brooke would mention friends who vacationed in Europe, compare our house to the new developments across town, wonder aloud why I never pursued management positions that required travel. Then she started staying late at work, coming home smelling like wine and expensive cologne. I found the texts on a Tuesday. Trevor had been messaging her for months. Not just flirting, but planning. Planning to leave me. Planning their life together. Planning how to handle the Ruby situation. My hands shook as I read Trevor describe me as a good guy who never learned to be a man. The divorce was swift and brutal. Brooke had been preparing, moving money, documenting every time I was tired after work, every school event I missed because of my schedule. Her lawyer painted me as an unambitious father who couldn't provide Ruby with the life she deserved. Mr. Carter works in a warehouse, the lawyer said, as if it was something shameful. Mrs. Holloway's future husband owns 15 properties and can provide private education, travel, cultural experiences that Mr. Carter simply cannot match. The judge agreed. Brooke got the house, primary custody and child support that left me with barely enough to rent a studio apartment above Chen's Chinese kitchen. The smell of beef lo mein became my alarm clock. The thin walls meant I heard every argument from the neighbors, every car that drove by, every reminder that I was alone. But I made that apartment ready for Ruby. Her corner had the purple butterfly decals we'd put up together when she was 5. I bought an air mattress for her, the best one I could afford, with purple sheets from Target. The weekend visits were everything to me. I'd pick her up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, ignoring Brooke's smirk from the doorway of Trevor's mini mansion. "Daddy," Ruby said one Saturday as we ate McDonald's, all I could afford that week, "why does Mom say you don't try hard enough?" The French fry turned to ash in my mouth. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "She says Uncle Trevor worked harder than you. That's why he has nice things and we had to move." I looked at my 8-year-old daughter, trying to find words that wouldn't turn her against her mother, wouldn't make her feel torn between us. "Sometimes people measure success differently, Ruby. Uncle Trevor measures it in money. I measure it in moments like this, having lunch with my favorite person in the world." She smiled, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. The poison was already spreading, and I didn't know how to stop it. The letter arrived on a Monday morning, slipped under my apartment door while I was sleeping after my night shift. Official courthouse stationery, Brooke's lawyer's name printed in bold letters at the top. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. She was filing for permission to relocate to California with Ruby and requesting modification of custody to 1 weekend per month plus 2 weeks in summer. I read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Due to Mr. Carter's limited financial resources and inability to provide adequate opportunities for the minor child, relocation is in the child's best interest. I called my lawyer, the cheapest one I could find. Dennis Hartley worked out of a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax prep office. "James, I'll be honest," he said, reviewing the filing. "Fighting this is going to cost you at least $10,000, and even then, judges rarely deny relocation when one parent can provide significantly better opportunities. 10,000 might as well have been 10 million. I had 900 in savings, every penny earmarked for Ruby's birthday present and our summer week together. But I couldn't lose her. I couldn't become one of those fathers who fade into phone calls and birthday cards. I picked up every extra shift the hospital would give me. 60 hours a week became 70, then 80. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and instant ramen, saving every dollar. My supervisor, Hank, found me asleep standing up one morning, leaning against my mop handle. "James, you're going to kill yourself at this pace," he said. "My daughter is all I have," I told him. If I don't fight for her now, I'll lose her forever. The custody hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, April 15th at 9 in the morning. I worked until 7, went home to shower and put on my only suit, the one I'd worn to my father's funeral 5 years earlier. The fabric was shiny at the elbows, the pants a bit too short, but it was all I had. In the courtroom, Brooke looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Designer dress, professional makeup, Trevor beside her in a $1,000 suit. Their lawyer went first, laying out their case with surgical precision. Your Honor, Mr. Holloway has enrolled Ruby in Westridge Academy, one of California's finest private schools. They've purchased a home in a gated community with excellent security. Mr. Holloway has established a college fund of $200,000. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter continues to work as a night janitor, living in a 400-square-foot apartment in a neighborhood with 3 break-ins this past month alone. Each fact was true, and each one felt like a nail in my coffin. When Dennis stood to present our side, his cheap suit and nervous manner seemed to emphasize everything they'd said about me. Your Honor, Mr. Carter is a devoted father who has never missed a scheduled visit. He maintains employment specifically to support his daughter and has done everything possible to maintain their relationship despite the challenges. Everything possible? Brooke's lawyer interrupted. Has he pursued higher education? Sought better employment? Made any effort to improve his circumstances? No, Your Honor. He remains content with mediocrity while Ruby deserves excellence. When it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked on the first word. Your Honor, I love my daughter more than anything in this world. Yes, I'm a janitor. Yes, I live in a small apartment, but I show up. Every single time I show up. I help with homework over video calls. I save for months to buy her the art supplies she loves. Being her father isn't about money, it's about being present. Brooke actually laughed. Not loud, just a small, dismissive sound that everyone heard. Being present doesn't pay for college, James. It doesn't provide opportunities. Ruby deserves more than your good intentions. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, looked at me with something like pity. Mr. Carter, the court recognizes your love for your daughter. However, we must consider the child's best interests, which include educational opportunities, financial security, and overall quality of life. She granted the relocation, 1 weekend per month, 2 weeks in summer. Travel costs to be split proportionally based on income, which meant I'd be paying almost all of it. As we filed out of the courtroom, Brooke stopped beside me. Trevor was getting the car, and for a moment it was just us in the hallway. She leaned in close, and I smelled her expensive perfume, saw the diamond earrings Trevor had bought her. Daddies with no money don't deserve kids, James, she said, her voice sweet like poison. Maybe if you'd been more ambitious like Trevor, you'd still have a family, but you were always content being small. Ruby won't be. That night, I called Ruby to explain the new arrangement. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to sound positive about our monthly adventures and summer plans. But she started crying, and then I was crying. And we stayed on the phone, just breathing together until Brooke took the phone and hung up. I sat in my empty apartment, listening to the neighbors argue through the walls, and wondered if Brooke was right. Maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe wanting to be a good father wasn't the same as being one. Maybe Ruby would be better off if I just faded away, let Trevor's money erase me completely. 3 months after losing Ruby, I was drowning in routine. Wake up at 10 p.m., eat something that barely qualified as food, drive to the hospital for my midnight shift, mop floors until 8 a.m., come home to an empty apartment, and try to sleep while the rest of the world went about their normal lives. The only bright spot was my monthly weekend with Ruby, and even those were getting harder. The last visit, she'd spent half the time on her new iPhone, a gift from Trevor, barely looking up when I suggested we go to the park. It was February 20th, a Tuesday night so cold that ice formed on the inside of my car windows. I was working the cardiac wing, which meant extra cleaning protocols and absolute quiet. The ward was mostly empty, except for a few post-op patients and their families. That's when I noticed her. An elderly woman sat alone in the waiting area, perfectly still, clutching a manila envelope like it contained the secrets of the universe. She wore an expensive coat, the kind Brooke would have admired, but her face was streaked with tears. Something about her seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I asked, setting down my mop bucket. "The cafeteria's closed, but there's a coffee machine around the corner if you need something warm." She looked up at me, and her whole body went rigid. Her eyes, sharp and blue despite her age, scanned my face like she was reading a book she'd been searching for her whole life. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you James Carter, James Michael Carter?" I nodded slowly, confused. "Yes, ma'am. Do I know you? Are you looking for someone in the hospital?" She stood up so fast she nearly fell, and I reached out to steady her. The moment my hand touched her arm, she started sobbing. Not quiet, dignified tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that echoed in the empty hallway. "Oh my God, it's really you," she gasped between breaths. "I've been searching for you for 40 years. Your mother was my daughter." The words hit me like a physical force. I stepped back, my mind racing. That's impossible. My mother died when I was born. My father raised me alone. Her family wanted nothing to do with us. "That's what Richard told everyone," she said, referring to my father by name. "But it's not the whole truth. Please, can we sit? There's so much you don't know, so much I need to tell you before it's too late." We sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs, the fluorescent lights humming above us. She opened the envelope with fingers that shook from age and emotion, pulling out photographs, documents, and letters yellowed with time. "My name is Eleanor Whitman," she began, and I felt my second shock of the night. Everyone knew that name. Whitman Industries manufactured half the medical equipment in every hospital in America. This woman was worth hundreds of millions. "Your mother, Grace, was my only child," Eleanor continued, pulling out a photograph. "She was 17 when she met your father at a summer fair. Richard was working at a mechanic's booth, and Grace said he was the first person who ever looked at her, not at my money." The photo showed a young woman who could have been Ruby in 10 years. Same eyes, same stubborn chin, same half-smile that meant she was planning something mischievous. "I was horrible about their relationship," Eleanor admitted, her voice heavy with decades of regret. "Richard was a mechanic. I was building a medical empire. I told Grace if she married him, I'd cut her off completely. No inheritance, no contact, nothing. And she chose him anyway," I said, understanding flooding through me. "She chose love," Eleanor nodded. "They got married at the courthouse with 2 witnesses from the street. Grace called me that night begging me to understand, but I hung up on her. I was so proud, so stupid, so concerned about what my business partners would think." She pulled out another document, a death certificate dated 38 years ago, my birth date. "When Grace died giving birth to you, Richard called me. He was destroyed, begging me to come to the funeral, to meet you, to be part of your life. And do you know what I said?" Her voice broke completely. I said if she'd listened to me, she'd still be alive. I blamed him. I blamed you. I blamed everyone but myself. "He never told me any of this," I said, my throat tight. "Richard told me to never contact either of you again. He said a grandmother who could be that cruel didn't deserve to know you. Then he disappeared. Changed his phone number, moved states, made it impossible to find you. I hired private investigators, but Richard was thorough. It took me 40 years, James, 40 years of searching, of regret, of waking up every night wondering what you looked like, who you'd become. Why now?" I asked. "After all this time, why now?" Eleanor's hand went to her chest, and I noticed how thin she was under the expensive coat. "Because I'm dying, James. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I've spent 4 decades building an empire, and I have no one to leave it to except the grandson I threw away. She reached back into the envelope and pulled out a legal document. But that's not why I'm really here. 2 weeks ago, my investigators finally found you. They told me everything about your life, about Ruby, about what Brooke did to you. They showed me pictures of Ruby and James. She looks exactly like Grace, exactly like her. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes intense. I know what it's like to lose a child because of pride and money. I won't watch you lose Ruby the same way. I'm here to make things right, if you'll let me. Eleanor pulled out a thick legal document from the envelope and placed it on the small table between us. The header read, Whitman Industries, Transfer of Assets and Succession Planning. My hands started shaking before I even picked it up. James, I own Whitman Industries outright, Eleanor said, her voice steady now, businesslike. No board of directors, no shareholders, just me. The company is valued at approximately $200 million. I manufacture medical equipment for hospitals across the country. This very hospital has contracted with us for 30 years. I looked around the cardiac wing, suddenly seeing the Whitman logo on IV pumps, monitoring equipment, even the adjustable beds. I'd been cleaning around her legacy for 2 years without knowing it. You're Eleanor Whitman, I repeated, trying to make it real in my mind. The actual Eleanor Whitman. And you're saying you're my grandmother. I'm saying I'm a fool who lost 40 years with her family because I thought money mattered more than love, she corrected. But I'm also saying I can fix this. Not what I did to your parents, that's beyond repair, but I can help you fight for Ruby. She flipped to another page in the document. This is a trust fund I established yesterday, $50 million, accessible immediately upon your signature. The rest of the company transfers to you upon my death, which will be sooner than later. I stood up, pacing the empty hallway. My mind couldn't process the numbers. 50 million. 200 million. These were fantasy numbers, monopoly money, not real life. This is insane, I said. You can't just show up after 40 years and hand me a fortune. I don't even know you. You don't know me. I know you work 80 hours a week to afford plane tickets to see your daughter, Eleanor said quietly. I know you sold your father's watch last month to pay for Ruby's birthday present. I know you eat ramen noodles for dinner so you can save money for her college fund that currently has $312 in it. I spun around. How do you know all that? Because I've had investigators watching you for 2 months, learning everything about you. Not to invade your privacy, but to understand who you are. She stood up, walking toward me with surprising strength. You're nothing like I expected Richard's son to be. You have Grace's heart, her ability to love without conditions. But you also have Richard's pride, his determination to do everything alone. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email from her lawyer. I know Brooke just filed for increased child support. She's claiming you're voluntarily underemployed, that you're refusing to better yourself out of spite. Trevor's lawyer sent the papers yesterday. How could you possibly know that? Those were filed under seal. When you have my resources, very little stays hidden, Eleanor said simply. Which brings me to my real point. James, I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness. I know money can't erase 40 years of absence, but money can level the playing field. Right now, Brooke and Trevor are using their wealth as a weapon. Let me give you an equal arsenal. She pulled out another phone, this one brand new, and handed it to me. That has the direct number for Harrison, Krensky, and Associates. They're the best family law firm in California. I've already put them on retainer. They're waiting for your call. I can't accept this, I said, but my voice was weakening. I don't even know if I believe you're really my grandmother. Eleanor reached into the envelope one more time and pulled out a sealed letter, old and yellowed. The writing on the front was faded but legible. For my baby, if something happens to me. Grace wrote this the night before you were born, Eleanor said, tears flowing again. Richard kept it with her things. I convinced him to give it to me during one of our arguments after she died. It's the only piece of her I have. I've read it 1,000 times, but it belongs to you. I opened it with trembling fingers. My mother's handwriting was neat, careful. My sweet baby, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't be there to tell you myself. But I need you to know that you were wanted, loved, and cherished before you even took your first breath. Your father is a good man who will raise you right. He'll teach you that money isn't everything, that love matters more than status. But baby, I also want you to know that you come from strength on both sides. My mother built an empire from nothing. Your father can fix anything with his hands. You have both legacies in your blood. Use them. Be better than we were, love fiercer than we did, and know that wherever I am, you were worth everything. You were my miracle. All my love, Mom. I sat down hard, the letter clutched in my hands. She knew she might die. The pregnancy was complicated from the start, Eleanor admitted, but she wanted you more than anything. She told Richard that even if she only got to carry you, it would be worth it to bring you into the world. I looked at this stranger who shared my blood, this titan of industry who had been brought low by regret. If I accept this, it's not for me, it's for Ruby. I would expect nothing less, Eleanor said. That's how I know you're Grace's son. And you understand I can't just forgive 40 years of absence? My father died thinking my mother's family hated us. I understand, Eleanor said simply. I'm not asking for forgiveness I don't deserve. I'm asking for the chance to help you keep your daughter. Brooke and Trevor turned money into a weapon. Let me help you forge a shield. I thought about Ruby, about the way she'd looked at Trevor's house with wonder, about Brooke's sneering words, about every night I'd fallen asleep calculating whether I could afford to fly to California twice in 1 month. Okay, I said finally. I'll take your help for Ruby. Eleanor smiled, and for a moment, I saw my mother in her face. Then, let's call those lawyers. We have a custody battle to win. The California courtroom looked exactly the same 6 weeks later, but everything else had changed. I walked in wearing a custom-tailored suit, Eleanor beside me and behind us, a legal team that cost more per hour than I used to make in a month. When Brooke and Trevor entered and saw us, the color drained from their faces. Your Honor, my lead attorney, Catherine Harrison, began, we're here to petition for immediate modification of the custody arrangement based on substantially changed circumstances. Mr. Carter is now the CEO in training of Whitman Industries and the primary beneficiary of a significant trust. He has relocated to California, purchased a home in the same school district as his daughter, and established educational trusts that exceed those provided by Mr. Holloway. Brooke's lawyer scrambled to respond. Your Honor, surely the court isn't swayed by sudden wealth. This is clearly a manipulation of the system. Just 2 months ago, Mr. Carter was a janitor. And according to your own arguments from the previous hearing, Catherine responded smoothly, financial resources were the primary factor in determining Ruby's best interests. Or does that only apply when it benefits your client? The judge, the same tired-eyed woman from before, looked between us with interest. Mr. Carter, is it true you've acquired substantial assets since our last hearing? I stood up. Your Honor, I've discovered I have a family inheritance, but more importantly, I've never stopped being Ruby's father. I've worked nights for 2 years, lived on nothing, sold everything I owned, all to maintain my relationship with my daughter. The money doesn't make me a better father. It just gives me the ability to prove what was always true. Ruby deserves to have both parents equally in her life. This is ridiculous, Brooke interrupted. He can't just buy his way back into custody. The judge's eyes sharpened. Interesting perspective, Mrs. Holloway, considering your previous argument centered entirely on financial superiority. Catherine presented our evidence methodically. Bank records showing I'd saved every penny for Ruby. Phone logs of daily calls. Screenshots of Brooke telling Ruby that poor daddies don't deserve children. Character statements from my supervisor, from Ruby's teachers saying she constantly asked when she could see her father more. Then came the killing blow. Your Honor, we also have evidence that Mrs. Holloway has been systematically alienating Ruby from her father, telling the child that Mr. Carter is, quote, pathetic and poor, and that she should be embarrassed of him. Trevor tried to stand, but Eleanor leaned forward. Sit down, Mr. Holloway. My investigators found some very interesting irregularities in your real estate dealings. Tax fraud, perhaps? I'd stay quiet if I were you. The judge's decision was swift. Joint legal custody, with me as the primary physical custodian during the school year. Brooke would have weekends and holidays, the exact reverse of what she demanded. As we left the courthouse, Brooke confronted me in the parking lot. This isn't fair, James. You can't just suddenly have money and take her from me. I looked at my ex-wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. You were right about one thing, Brooke. Ruby deserves better. Better than a mother who teaches her that love has a price tag. Better than growing up believing that money determines worth. I'm not taking her from you. I'm giving her what you said she deserved. A parent who loved her enough to fight for her even when I had nothing. You wouldn't have won without that old woman's money, she spat. No, I agreed, I wouldn't have. But I was here fighting even when I couldn't win. Where were you when Ruby cried for me, counting Trevor's money? That afternoon, I picked up Ruby from school as her primary parent for the first time. She ran to me, launching herself into my arms, crying happy tears into my shoulder. Daddy, does this mean I live with you now? Most of the time, sweetheart. Is that okay? It's everything, she whispered. Eleanor lived 8 more months, long enough to teach me the business, long enough to watch Ruby call her Grandma Ellie and mean it, long enough to attend Ruby's 9th birthday party where she gave Ruby a locket with Grace's picture inside. On her deathbed, Eleanor held my hand while Ruby was at school. I spent 40 years building an empire, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But these 8 months with you and Ruby have brought me more joy than all of it combined. Your mother would be so proud of you, James. Tell Ruby about Grace. Tell her about the woman who loved you both before you even existed. I forgive you, I told her, meaning it. Mom would forgive you too. She smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. That's more than I deserve, but exactly what I needed to hear. After Eleanor passed, I found one last letter in her papers, addressed to Ruby for her 18th birthday. I put it in a safety deposit box, knowing that someday Ruby would understand the price of pride and the power of forgiveness. 2 years have passed since that night in the hospital when Eleanor found me. Ruby's 11 now, thriving in school, still painting those purple butterflies, but now adding portraits of the grandmother she got to love, even if briefly. We live in a beautiful house, yes, but more importantly, we live in it together. Last week, Ruby asked me something that stopped my heart. Daddy, do you think Mom was wrong? About poor daddies not deserving kids? I sat on her bed, choosing my words carefully. Your mom was both wrong and right, sweetheart. She was right that you deserve every opportunity in the world. But she was wrong about what makes a parent worthy. I mopped hospital floors for 2 years, and every stroke of that mop was an act of love for you. The money Grandma Ellie left us opened doors, but love is what walked through them. I'm glad you got rich, Daddy, she said, hugging me. Not because of the stuff, but because you smile now. You didn't smile before, not really. As I tucked her in that night, I thought about Eleanor's 40 years of regret, about Grace choosing love over money, about Richard raising me alone rather than accepting help from someone who'd proven cruel. I thought about Brooke, who gained Trevor's wealth but lost her daughter's respect. And I thought about myself, the janitor who became a millionaire but measured wealth in bedtime stories and morning hugs. The truth Eleanor hid for 40 years had shattered 3 generations of our family. But sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt stronger. Ruby and I are proof of that. We're the happy ending Grace never got to see, the forgiveness Eleanor thought she'd never find, and the love that no amount of money can buy or replace. Every night, when I check on Ruby before bed, I see 3 generations of women in her face. Eleanor's determination, Grace's courage, and her own fierce spirit. And I know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Because that's what family does. Not the family that shares your blood necessarily, but the family that fights for you when the world says you're not worth fighting for. Money gave me the weapons to win the custody battle. But love, the same love that made me mop floors at 3 in the morning just to afford a plane ticket, that's what made me a father worth fighting to keep. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to remember that love is worth more than money. Drop a comment below about what touched you most, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about families who found their way back to each other. Remember, sometimes the longest journey isn't measured in miles or years, but in the distance between pride and forgiveness.